Good afternoon, everybody. PA Figs. So I did want to talk about overwintering fig trees. And this here is my Chicago Hardy that I have on a south-facing wall, which is the best place you can put a fig tree in ground in northern cold climates. It gets a little extra sun throughout the day and keeps it warmer. And I actually thought I had lost most of the growth. You can see it snaps right off a lot of it. But just today I came out and you can see there are quite a few branches that survived. And it's almost like the distinguishment between this orange color and some more of the normal bark looking color. I think that's going to be the designation for what returns. I didn't trim this in the fall. I wanted to see what would die off in the winter, and then I'll trim it to make sure that the live branches are still present. I don't cover it, I don't wrap it, don't do anything with it. It's been the last couple of years where it hasn't died back to the roots, and it does fruit because it doesn't take a long time for the fruit on the Chicago Hardy to ripen. And it's an excellent fruit, so it's definitely one that I recommend to people that are looking to put a tree in ground in the Northeast. Okay, now let's take a look at a couple of the fig trees that I left in the greenhouse all winter. Both of these are Genovese Nero. I had a few others in here. I will say this Genovese Nero in a fabric pot had, as far as I could tell, zero die-off. This Genovese Nero that was in a self-watering pot, a little bit of tip die-off. I think primarily because this was a green tip. The one problem I do have in the greenhouse is the trees don't want to go dormant in the fall. So because of that, there's a lot of tender growth, and that tender growth tends to die off in the winter, even in here. But for the most part, the trees do really, really well in the greenhouse. This Manresa was in the greenhouse, again, just a little bit of tip. And then this Calderone de Minor was probably the most impacted, and that's because it never hardened off. This main stem here was totally green all the way until winter came, and then it finally died off. But you can see roots just in this little pot, nothing special with it. I don't think I watered it more than once or twice, and it's doing well in here. So the greenhouse really does well for overwintering, and it's not heated. I didn't have it heated until April, I think, maybe March, but the trees did real well in here. All right, and lastly, you'll notice a pot with a hole in it. It's because there was a fig tree in here. It's a self-watering pot placed in a larger pot with soil put around it. And I thought the soil would help insulate it over the winter, and it might do okay in here. Well, it didn't. It died completely, 100%, it's gone. I would say this was the second winter, and a pretty easy winter. The first winter, probably 2/3 to a half of it died off, and it really suffered. It did fruit for me last year. I don't think it ripened in time, though. This year, this winter, it completely died off. You just couldn't handle it. So if you're gonna keep your figs and you don't have a garage to put them in, best option, if you're gonna keep them outside, I'd say is a greenhouse. I think it protects from the wind. It's not heated. The watering tank I had in there was completely frozen solid many weeks out of the winter. But the fig trees, protected from the wind and getting the warmth during the day, they did real well in there. Secondly, I think you can plant in ground. I would recommend wrapping the tree, and you should expect some die-off. If the tree dies off, hopefully it doesn't all die, and hopefully it will come back from the roots if it does die to the ground. But leaving it fully unprotected definitely sets it back, because you can see my trees that were protected, how leafed out they are, solid growth on them, should start putting out figs soon. The one that I have in ground is just starting to break with leaf buds, so it's going to have a long catch up to do. I would not recommend in the Northeast putting a long time ripening fruit such as like a Black Madeira or Flanders in the ground. I just don't think your season's going to be long enough, unless maybe you wake it up early by putting a clear plastic bin over it in the early spring, something to get that ground warmed up and to get it moving. And I definitely wouldn't recommend leaving the fig tree out in a pot, because it's going to end up just like this one with nothing in it. So again, if you can store in your garage, and I will say that the garage storage does almost as well as the greenhouse, except in the greenhouse you do have to be careful that your trees actually go to sleep in the fall, or else they will have some die off. In the garage, the problem you have is more in the spring, where they start to leaf out, and then you have to worry about transitioning them to the sun without sunburn. In the greenhouse, the transition outdoors is much simpler, much quicker. You still have to do it because the greenhouse is UV protected, but it's not as bad as transitioning from a pure dark garage out into the wide open sun. So, okay, those are your options for storing a fig tree over the winter. Hopefully this was helpful. Feel free to ask any questions below.